day for most of you, so maybe a couple of more sessions and then we should be done for today. The topic that we have right now is regarding robotization and getting more mechanical in terms of the supply chain infrastructure. Now, this has been a topic that has been discussed quite a few times earlier. What we typically see is that, in recent times, a lot of supply chains have found, there's been a lot of talk around getting this topic done. However, overall adoption in the industry has been fairly limited. So the question is, why is that so? And what are the problems that face us, and then how do we try to solve those problems, right? So we have a very good panel right now, and maybe I'll kick off the session by asking the first question, which is, by doing this work, what exactly is the problem that we are trying to solve? Why do we at all need robotization? Why do we at all need mechanization of supply chain, right? So maybe Suraj, if you can give us a little bit of insight that why do you think this is required, and by doing this, what is the problem that we are really trying to solve?
Thank you. I think as far as the customers in a B2B scenario or a consumer in a B2C scenario, their requirement or expectation is very, very simple. I think from centuries back when trade began, or the first commercial transaction would have taken place, the expectation from the customer is very simple from a supply chain perspective: on time, in full. And I think centuries later, even till today, that's the only expectation that the customer has, that whatever I have ordered, please deliver to me on time and in full. Now, in doing so, I think obviously we have had the advantage of improvement in technology, which has enabled it to happen much more efficiently. And that is one big trend which obviously has changed more so in the recent past than before, wherein with the emerging technologies, I think the customer is expecting companies to adopt these technologies and help to improve the OTIFs for them. Second, I think from a consumer perspective, again, most organizations have also begun to use supply chain as actually their USP, as a differentiator from competition. And for example, if it's an e-commerce organization, they want to ensure that you get a super fast delivery, 1 day, 2 days. I'm sure many of us here are subscribing to Amazon Prime. If it is, say, a B2B organization, let's say in the textile value chain, with the advent of fast fashion, you want to ensure that the apparels is reaching faster to the end retailers. The Zaras and the H&Ms of the world want, the turnaround time of their apparels to be very quick. So again, this whole piece of supply chain efficiency has become, many of the organizations have made them their USP. Good, bad, ugly, I don't know. It's put in a lot of pressure also. I mean, it doesn't matter if your bread arrives in 10 minutes or 30 minutes, but today most organizations are, saying I'll deliver you in 1 hour. Someone says I'll deliver you in 30 minutes. Someone now today they're saying we'll deliver you in 10 minutes. So we've also spoiled consumers with all these choices. Third, I think from a customer point of view, I think increasingly customers have become very, very conscious. I think they want organizations with which they deal with to be sustainable. And if you see, even in the global emission norms, the greenhouse emission norms, the whole supply chain forms part of scope 3. And which most organizations are now trying to do. So I think from a consumer, very clear, he wants it from a green channel that is coming to him. And finally, I think in the recent past, we've seen more disruptions around supply chain, and therefore customers, consumers, B2B spaces especially largely, are looking for more than one source of supply chain. So if you see the whole China plus one thing that has happened, no longer do after COVID especially, no longer do companies want to be dependent only on one source, that is China. They increasingly want to move to other sources. Traditional concepts of just-in-time delivery after COVID especially is no longer organizations are preferring. Or everybody wants to go back to the safety stock model.
Yeah.
So these are the things which are affecting from a customer-consumer point of view. I mean, happy to hear other panelists on how now we are responding from organization's point of view to meet these expectations.
So maybe the next question, maybe Ashwin, you can help us answer that. So given these requirements and these changes, how is automation going to solve this problem? I mean, what kind of customer behavior? I mean, we understand the customer behavior part, but what is automation going to help? And do you have any examples maybe at your company where you have tried to address some of these issues through automation?
Thanks so much, Samik, and very interesting to hear the views of the needs of the market and the needs of the customer. And let me say that this is exactly what we are looking to address as part of automation, right? I mean, when it comes to OTIF, when it comes to safety, when it comes to going back to an inventory model, you want to ensure that you're able to store, you're able to meet demand as the demand comes in, you're able to deliver on time, you're able to deliver also stock, not necessarily trying to dump to, let's say, you're the next in your chain, right? You want to ensure that you're able to meet specific requirements of either your distributors or your retailers, right? So that's all that is possible now with automation. What happens because of all of this requirements from either your B2B customers or the consumer is adds a lot of complexity to what the supply chain has to manage and has to deliver. And I really like the thought. This is really now the era of the supply chain manager. I mean, you've seen this era of the production manager, and now the supply chain manager is the hero. He's no longer just a cost center, and he's looking to really be the differentiator. And that's where automation comes in. I mean, where can automation play a role? It can play a role across the entire supply chain, right? And if I was to take any warehouse, you're looking at automation playing a role from the tasks which have been traditionally manual, which is loading or unloading of trucks. It plays a role in how you store and how you bring material back for picking and for dispatch. And all of these are processes which you can automate. You had asked a question at the start saying that what's a precursor to automation, right? And a precursor to automation in many ways is whether the processes have been put in place, whether they are standardized, whether these processes, and that's where the journey of Indian companies is at, right? Indian companies are going through this maturity wherein you are having the standardization of processes, you're doing your digitization, you're going to digitalization, and all of this aids for automation, and that's where automation has been picking up. To give you an example, and I'll just take the lead from what the earlier panelist was mentioning about in retail or in fashion. How can automation play a role, right? If you are able to connect your retailer directly to your warehouse, right? And that could be through a vendor portal, it could be through going through your ERP. That means that you can have your order hitting your warehouse. Your warehouse has stocks. You have a TAT which you are wanting to fulfill. You have an SLA agreement with your retailers. You can fulfill, even in B2B context, you can fulfill within a day, and this is including logistics time. The order comes, hits the ERP. You have the mechanization which is enabling you to hold inventory, to hold different kinds of inventory. You're able to bring the right material at the right time. You can, for example, in case of fabric, you can cut the fabric to length. You can quickly package it, send it now for transportation. All of this is done within a shift, right? Which means that you can very quickly, from an order being placed by a retailer sitting in a remote location to your warehouse acting on that order, to be able to ship out the material within, let's say, even 3-4 hours is now possible, all because of automation. I mean, there are challenges within a warehouse, right? Picking takes a lot of time. Having the order list in place, it takes a lot of time. All of this now, because of both digital as well as mechanization, has meant can be done very quickly. And that's where I think the advantages of automation companies. I just gave you an example where it can be done. I'll take very quickly another example, especially when it comes to areas like truck loading, unloading, right? I mean, this is a job that nobody wants to do anymore within a warehouse. The availability of manpower to do this kind of jobs is becoming very difficult. It's backbreaking, literally. It's in very harsh conditions. By doing automation, you are able to ensure that you are able to put your resources productively and in areas where it is economical, it's efficient, it is value adding, right? And all of these things is now possible through automation. So yeah, just the entire chain can be automated. There are many examples of it happening, and it is adding value to customers in, I mean, the automation company, the companies who are doing automation to add value to their customers. So yeah, that's my view on automation, and there's a full gamut of automation that is possible.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Ashwin. I think one of the other things that we hear a lot is the physical infrastructure that you need for automation. So, for example, we hear a lot about robots, we hear a lot about drones, right? So, maybe Ashish, do you have any experience, or have you seen anywhere where robots and drones are actually being used to try and make a bunch of these activities efficient?
Okay. Hello. Yeah. First of all, good evening, everyone. Thanks for inviting me for the forum. So to answer to your question, so robotics is something it was coined 100 years back, basically, and it has been lot used in European nations. So whether it be Germany or whether it be UK, Australia, those kind of nations, they use it a lot. It is still very new in Indian market. So when you see the robotics automation in Indian market, the market size would be somewhere to the tune of $5 billion. Though every year it is growing at a certain CAGR, maybe at double digit 13%, and maybe after 7 years, 6 years, it can become $84 billion, something like, around say 35, $36 billion market, but still it is very new. Now, having said that, there are different type of robotics that has been used, and especially after COVID. So when I talk about COVID, before COVID, the scenario was completely different, even in global market also, when we compare, and India market, it's still lagging behind the global scenario, majorly used by, say, Israel, US, Germany and all. So after COVID, because a lot of supply chain disruptions, which has already been mentioned, there were like a lot of surge in demand also, and something which companies, they thought that with the people who are working in the warehouse, with the overheads, with the manual labor activity, it may not be possible because of the rise in the labor cost, because of the efficiency, the way they are working. So company, they started using robotic automations, basically, in a way like there could be forklifts or MHEs which would be working without driver, so driverless forklifts. There would be like a kind of autonomous mobile robotics which would be helping moving in the warehouse, basically hovering in the warehouse. They may move material also, they may move pallet also. Drone, as rightly mentioned, for inventory management, it can track inventory, can lift inventory, those kind of things. Even drones are used basically by companies like Walmart in US for end customer deliveries because they consume less time. Now, the type of investment for this robotics is quite huge because a lot of companies, when they invest, recently I saw that DHL has invested in Australia $150 million US, basically. That's quite huge. Even in US, in Latin America somewhere, it invested around $15 million US. So the kind of investment is quite huge. And when some logistic companies, they want to invest, basically, they want to see whether customer really need it or not, whether they have that kind of returns when they invest. So what is the payback time? So that is another one of the question. Earlier, robotics were majorly used in industrial basically domain, basically in manufacturing, welding, those kind of activities. But now slowly companies are also using it in warehouses. So the things have changed, but what is the payback time? Whether it be 3 years, whether it is 6 years, we don't know. So that is also one of the things why companies, many companies, they are hesitant in investing in robotic automation. So when it comes to India's standpoint, there are many companies which believe completely in robotics automation, like Asian Paints could be one of a very good example, which basically go a lot of into like supply chain digitalization, also robotics automation. Similarly, there are IT companies who majorly work in this particular field. Like for example, IBM, they have been working in AI robotics since long. And they have got good customer base also. Like for example, Amazon could be one of their customers. And they have got this kind of basically people who want to buy it basically. So having said that, when I talk about, I come from an organization called Electrolux. Electrolux is globally world #2 in terms of domestic appliances. India's standpoint, we are not much into robotics, but yes, globally we are. We have implemented first robotics in Australia some 19 years back, and it gave huge returns. Similarly, we are using robotics in Latin America, and it has given huge returns. So when you see in terms of cost reduction, it gives you somewhere around, say, 65% cost reduction, but maybe after a period of time. In terms of efficiency, it can do in the time 50% lesser than what a manual activity would take. So yes, this we are trying to use, but when I talk about India's standpoint, we are more into digitalization supply chain. Like for example, we have got WMS, warehouse management system. We have got tools and system for planning, basically IBP, that is integrated business planning tool. Now, AI is something we are looking at. Now, how to integrate it with existing system? How we'll be using those kind of API integration? That is one of the things we are looking at. But yes, that would happen in future, in near time, but we are in more into global markets.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much, Ashish. So I think we have now discussed a little bit about the need. What are the typical technical things that you need for this, for these automation, etc. I think there's a very big softer aspect also, right? So, what kind of tools do you need? What kind of people do you need? What kind of skills do they need? And then how do you manage risks? And then, of course, you start looking at how much is it going to cost and get it to return. So I think, Sharmishtha, this question is for you. How do you think people should plan their journey of automation and robotization? And what are the typical pitfalls that you need to watch out for?
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me to this event. It's a very interesting question. In fact, when we think about automation and robotics, the first thing that comes to our mind is a huge cost, loss of job. So we have all these detrimental thoughts that are coming in our mind, but automation robotics is very varied in supply chain. So it can be as interesting as having machine learning do virtual tours and training for new joinee in the warehouse. You know, and that will not lead to someone's loss of job for someone. In fact, that would lead to upskilling people. So there are various aspects of automation that plays. For instance, our friends talked about, all the other panelists talked about robotics and automation in warehouse and manufacturing lines. The robotics and automation also has a very strong role in planning, in risk management. In terms of demand planning or network, if there's a risk, let's say China port is down because of COVID, the system, AI and machine learning systems are up for multinational organizations who are operating in various countries. Like for instance, Merck, the organization that I work for, they have robotics and machine learning based risk management system that optimizes the network. So they are constantly looking at what are the risks that are there in the supply chain and give alternate solutions almost in no time, in real time. So those are also some of the examples. Now, when people think about automation, they feel that it's a lot of work. Where do we start from? Most of the programs or the implementation that I have seen in my career, or which are work going on in the industry, starts from the requirement. So the first is, what is your requirement? Do not go by what is happening in the industry. So that is the first step. Second is, there has to be a very strong planning phase where you need to do the cost-benefit analysis and what are the options available to you. So, there are various options, like you can go for complete automation and upfront cost, and you can implement all of that and have an upfront cost of then you would be answerable to the senior leadership on what is the ROI for next 5 years. That can be an option. A lot of organizations do that. But then there is also option of going in a plan with a implementation organization, like the solution providers in the industry. They are working very closely with the organizations in terms of a 5-year plan, where they not only come and implement the hardwares and softwares according to your solution, but they also maintain it for next 5 years, and you are almost paying them a plan, pay a maintenance fee kind of a thing, and at the end of 5 years, they train your people, leave, and you are self-sufficient to now lead the entire implementation. So there are lots of programs that the solution providers have. The issue is that we are sometimes not aware of those programs, and we do not enter into the gate thinking that there's a lot of cost involved in it. So that is the cost part. The second thing that I feel is that most of the automation that we are looking at right now, we should have done yesterday. And COVID helped us see that very clearly, because any of the automation that we do has a gestation period. So you cannot expect the technology to come today and start giving you an output from tomorrow. So any implementation has at least 2 to 3 years of gestation period for your processes to follow the technology, and for your capabilities to know, for your people to know how to use the process and technology, and all those things take time. So technology implementation is the least of the problem. That happens that's a 10% of the problem. It happens in 6 months, 1 year. But after that, the actual journey starts, where your processes have to be aligned to use the technology that is there, and then the resources should be there, trained, and having the trust in the output, and having the confidence or having the bandwidth to take the errors of the technology and cleaning that, because that also has to be done by the people, by your team only, and making that implementation successful. And that all takes at least 3 to 4 years. So if you are looking at some output, like Suraj rightfully said, customers' expectations are rising. They want things in 10 minutes. So if you want to be competitive in the market, you should have started 3 years back. But if you haven't started, then maybe today is the right time for all of us to start. And the process is for identify your requirements, have a good plan, do a cost-benefit analysis, find your right partners who are partnering with you with the right solution, whether you want to put a capital investment at the beginning, or you want to spread it out over the next 5 years. There are a lot of programs. And then the last 2 things, which is most important, is having the right processes to support the technology, and having the right people. So upskilling your existing people and hiring new people who would then take the technology forward. So these are some of the things that anybody who's looking at implementation and automation has to go through.
Yeah, great. So I think the other thing that we hear a lot is what are the risks of failure? So if implementation doesn't happen well, what all can go wrong? So in terms of risks, and therefore, so let me try to give you a little bit of my experience on that. So typically what happens is, when you try to do something new, and if it is not working well in the first few months, there's a general lack of trust on that project, and then very quickly people are there to basically say that, okay, I don't think this is going to work. So it's very important to keep that in mind, that whenever we try something new, we probably have to spend a lot more time in planning and structuring it and making sure that it is well planned. Otherwise, there is this whole risk of things not working as it should be. And the second very important thing, a place of failure that I have seen is, a lot of people have gone ahead with technology without necessarily analyzing what do you really need for your business, right? So there is a bit of a FOMO here that everybody is doing it, I should also be doing it. I think that's actually not a right thing. I think you mentioned, Sharmishtha, that it starts with what do I really need. I think that's a very important issue. Without that, you could land up with a lot of technology which may not be very suitable, or within your context may be very hard to take it forward, right? Okay, so now going forward, we still see, I mean, therefore there are challenges of implementation, there's a cost issue, but people who have done it, we also hear a lot of concerns from let's say the supply chain managers, the supply chain organization, or people in the warehouse, etc. Maybe Sreenivas, you can give us a bit of your experiences. Are people concerned that automation, robotization, etc., is going to take away jobs, is going to make them redundant? Is that a concern in the shop floor, or is that really something that you think can be is not the case and it could be handled differently?
Thank you very much, Samik, for actually inviting me for the conference. And it's a great question. I will actually say that, it is a concern initially for everybody. And in fact, I would actually want to kind of roll back 30 years ago when banking system was actually wanting to do automation by way of computerization. The very people who actually opposed about the computerization because of the fear of the loss of jobs are the people whom, if you go into the bank today by any chance, without a computer, they can never work. So the whole idea is also about change management and how do we manage this particular change with respect to people, convincing people that automation is not about actually taking away jobs, robotization is not about taking away jobs, but it is actually making your jobs easy. If I go back to our Factories Act, for example, it actually talks about 8-hour shifts. Now we have actually extended to 12-hour shifts very recently because of the fact that the whole thing is that, earlier people were expected to do very heavy jobs, which is not the case anymore. And, today there are, robots which actually pick up the heavy loads. They are assisting the people to actually do that particular job. So, to answer your question, is there a fear on the shop floor? Yes. How can we encounter and how can we actually make sure that those fears are taken away? That's the process of change management, which I would say. I would also like to add a small point in terms of what you said and also my earlier panelist, Sharmishtha, said in terms of the ROI and the payback on robotization. There are two use cases typically which I see. Use cases where it's very difficult for human beings to actually go and work, like in a paint shop, like in a very complicated way, or like in a very dusty environment and so on and so forth. That's very simple. Case number two is a case where your labor cost savings far outweigh the capex. Now, obviously, yes, being a global head of supply chain, the first phase of implementation, we did it in North America, Western Europe, Japan, and then we're bringing it to India also. And the third use case which comes in is basically the Amazons of the world, where you need to do huge amount of sorting, huge amount of pick, pack, etc., which is going to be physically impossible to put 10,000 people in a 1 million square foot warehouse. That's the kind of people density. To avoid that, you will need a robotization and automation to increase the speed. So these are the three typical use cases which I see, whereby it makes a lot of business sense.
Thank you.
I don't know if I've answered
thanks
the question.
a lot. Yeah, of course.
In my past experience, whenever we did implementation of technology, my experience has been that people have actually upskilled themselves. So we have planners who used to work on, and I'm just giving a very simple example. People are planning on Excel files, and then technology comes in like SAP demand forecasting tool or demand 360 JDA, etc. And suddenly they are trained on those technologies and they are upskilled and their value in the market goes up. So most of the time when we see, let's say the production manager doing Excel-based production planning, and then suddenly all the control panels and automated production lines are implemented, they are more aware of the technology and their skill sets are now more valued in the industry. So on the contrary to the thought, when the journey starts, people think that they're going to lose their job, but actually they end up upskilling themselves and then they are more valuable to the industry.
So I think that it's a bit of change management as well as communication, right? So Ashish, you wanted to say something else?
I would like to add 1 or 2 points to it. So adding to what both the panelists have said, like it is more like robots, basically they are helping the people who are working in the warehouse rather than taking away their job. So it is a kind of fear, kind of thing that has already arisen. So to add 1 or 2 points, like when we are talking about the autonomous mobile robotics, they basically move the pallets. So it's a kind of mundane job. Okay. So people who are actually moving the pallets, they can do more value-added work rather than moving the pallets. Similarly, they can help in sorting. They can help in picking. So kind of mundane job. So people, they can utilize their skill sets something better. So once this, and there are also robots which can communicate with the people. They can work like how the human, they are guiding them, so they can communicate. They are called cobots basically. So those kind of things are basically something which will help and improve the efficiency of the people also who are working in the warehouse.
Yeah. Okay, great, great. So look, I think I'll try to briefly summarize what we discussed today. So I think we started with the hypothesis that, this is important. We hear this a lot, but somehow industry adoption has been relatively low. And then we discussed why that is the case. So we also tried to understand why is it important, what is the problem we are trying to solve. And basically this entire push is coming from the customer, and the size and scale of the operation is, I think the understanding is that the size and scale is going to be quite difficult for people alone to handle, otherwise you'll need big armies and they may not be available. I think the second topic we said is that there are multiple types of automation that you could do. So one is the digital part, but I think the more physical things are stuff like robots, for stuff like drones, then they are expensive, and therefore it needs a very thorough assessment of what is going to be the utilization of these assets, what is going to be the payback period, and when are they going to turn profitable. Not all geographies will probably benefit from having robots, but some geographies to start will definitely have, and over time it's just going to get across. Then we also discussed that, look, there is a soft side. So, the people, how do you upskill them? How do you motivate them? There's an element of change management. There's an element of risk management. So, the entire scope of activities is actually going to be there to make sure that we are able to implement this properly. And finally, we talked about people, and then we said, okay, there may be a fear of job losses, but most probably that is not likely to be the case. Because a lot of this automation is meant to help people do their jobs a lot more efficiently and take away the mundane jobs, right? I think I have one last comment here, and maybe any one of the panelists can actually answer that. How do we, so this is appearing as a bit of a specialization. This is not a very generic topic, right? So how do we start thinking of actually then building capability, right? So, for example, if you go to a normal engineering school, I don't think anybody is teaching this very specifically. Or even for a business school, I don't think this topic, maybe there are a few, but not that much. So the question is, do we see a need for some structured capability inputs getting into this kind of a field so that we actually start seeing a lot more, let's say, trained workforce in the market who are able to take these jobs? Or we think that's really not required, people can learn on the job. What's your sense?
I'll take a stab at it. So there are both ways are possible. One is organizations are taking a very strong step in terms of training people. So whenever they are bringing in new technology, there are consultants who come in from those technology expert organizations and train the existing employees. So I've also seen new millennials or people who are open to technology taking courses. So there are very interesting machine learning, AI-based training modules, Power BI training modules, and there, name it, and those kind of training modules are there in the industry, and a lot of people are taking those trainings on their own. So both ways it's possible, but people who are open to new technology and who are adapting and training themselves, while if the company is providing them the training or doing it on their own, they are the winners. So they are ahead of the curve as compared to others.
All right. Okay, I think we are, sorry, you want to add something?
So 1 or 2 points that I would like to add is that, first of all, there is no proper law and regulations in this particular field. So I think Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, they need to work in bringing some laws and regulation into it. Then I think it can happen in a more structured way. then more parties will come into this particular domain and they'll try to invest because there will be regulations and laws. And then more people, they will invest in terms of institutions also and in developing the talent. So whatever people have learned outside India, maybe some people, they have exposure of outside market, they can bring in those knowledge and have that kind of database or that kind of passing those knowledge in Indian markets, bringing them some institute which only work in this particular piece, basically. So laws and regulation would be one of the points that I would like to highlight. Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. So this is a very interesting topic, and you know, I mean, you can go on for a full day on discussing this. I think we are almost going to run out of time. So maybe let me close this discussion right now. And thanks a lot to all my panelists. Okay. So maybe with that we will come to an end of this panel discussion. So thanks a lot to my panelists for sharing your ideas and views, and thanks a lot to the organizers for getting us here. This is an interesting topic, and I'm sure there'll be more opportunities to discuss with them. So in case anybody wants to know anything more or any specific interest, you know, you can have our contacts from the organizers, and we are very happy to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.